Hello, everyone. Good morning. How are you doing? Emmy here. Welcome to another meaningful conversations with Emmy here in the Pami Code Facebook group. And today we are joined by this amazing human being, Tricia Murray. Tricia is actually a therapist, a coach, a doula, and a mom of four. And she supports women through fertility, birth, and motherhood. And I'm really excited to talk to Tricia today because she went through a challenging period in her life, which I can actually relate to. And I would love to hear how she pulled her act together, recover, and make changes in her life. So I'm sure it will be such an inspiring conversation. And welcome, Tricia. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for asking me.
Well, I saw your post in Lightbulb. I think we are both members on Lightbulb, and you were talking a bit about your experience of having a nervous breakdown when you gave birth to your third son. So I assume this isn't something that you experienced in the first time or the second time around. It happened the third time. What was
Well,
that
it
like?
was actually the second time because my first two were a set of twins.
Oh,
So I had,
okay.
I had twins in 2008, and my twins were through fertility treatment. So, and we were so excited to have this like set of twins. We were just absolutely thrilled. And but I think through a lot of that, I had probably had anxiety, but didn't really realize that's what it was. Because I think actually 11 years ago, anxiety wasn't really as openly discussed as it is right
Mm,
now. And I think I never understood what a lot of those feelings were, and that living on adrenaline and constantly living in that sort of hyper sort of manic in sort of state. So I fell pregnant spontaneously with my third child, which was a complete shock to all of us, I think. And after that happened, when he was a few months old, I had what I can only describe as being like a complete nervous breakdown. And I think that was born from living in that high state of anxiety for all of that time. And probably even looking back to the fertility treatment, probably I was very anxious through all of that and that whole pregnancy and that whole time after I had them. And then I think my body just was like, that is enough.
So were you
That's
exhausted? Do you think it was a mix of physical exhaustion, the hormones, the psychological um you know it's not easy. It's not easy to actually give birth, and your body goes through so many changes
yeah,
on top
yeah,
of having that responsibility to another human being. So
absolutely.
what did your anxiety look like? Because anxiety is experienced in many different ways by people, and it's actually good that we can talk about this now
Yeah,
openly. But what
absolutely.
was that like for you?
Um, I mean, I work with quite a lot of women in this area, and I think a lot of the time what we think is around mental health in women is it's women who don't necessarily bond with their babies or they don't necessarily love their babies. And actually, I think my anxiety was the opposite. So
Mm.
I think I was very sort of controlling. I didn't want anybody else to touch the babies. If the babies smelled like anybody else, like I could feel myself feeling quite
You're
panicky.
protecting your
Very,
child.
very, I had a very sort of strong like mama bear instinct. Felt nobody else could look after my babies as well as I could, which was obviously true. But I felt nobody else could look
Well,
after
you're
my
the mom.
mum. I felt nobody else could look after my babies. I was really worried about my husband looking after them. I think I was just very, very, very protective.
There were some control issues there.
Yeah, massive control issues. And even things like just being awake a lot of the time, like listening out for them, worried like they were going to like choke in their sleep or something was going to happen. So a lot of checking, probably a tiny bit of that sort of those sort of compulsions. So going in to check that they were still breathing, that they were still alive,
Mm.
that nothing was happening to them, worried about everything, worried about what they were eating, what they were sleeping, what their nap schedule was, what they were doing, just all those things that any new time, any sort of first time mum has. And then I think obviously then I had my third child, so then it just added to all of that. And I think there's only so much of that that you can actually
How far apart were your kids in terms of?
22 months between the three of them. So it was very, very, very tight. And
Mm.
obviously, looking back now, I realise actually what tiny, tiny babies the twins were. Although thinking at that time, they're these like huge monsters in comparison to my tiny
Little. Yeah.
but yeah, so I think I think really what happened is there's only so much of that high anxiety state that you can live in. And I think it was, I don't think it was hormonal. I don't think it was that at all. Um, both births hadn't been great. They were both cesarean births. The first one was traumatic because I had quite a big hemorrhage. The second one was very traumatic because they couldn't actually cut me open. And also, I think as well, I really was hoping to have a vaginal birth, and that was taken out of my hands completely because he was 2 weeks over his due date, or 10 days over his due date. And so, I think I felt really disempowered, and I think I was grieving quite a lot because I really wanted to have this vaginal birth, and I had set myself up to have this vaginal birth after my previous cesarean. So I think there was a lot of grief and sadness and just feeling quite
The
disconnected.
expectations and not really
Yeah,
getting what you were hoping for.
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
think for
It's quite
if
a
I
big mix.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think for me, I experienced anxiety and depression as well because I couldn't actually breastfeed my child. You know, I was
yeah,
expecting that he would be fully breastfed, but I just didn't have milk. You know, there was
yeah,
just like drops, you know, just absolutely nothing. So on top of the exhaustion and the disappointment, because you had expectations, that
absolutely.
actually accumulates. But in your case, did you notice that you were anxious, or you were just getting on with things without really noticing what's going on with you?
I didn't really notice anything until basically I couldn't really walk. Actually, it was a very physical manifestation. So I honestly thought I had like some sort of like leukemia or some sort of like I really thought I was like
Your body was responding.
and my body sort of responded by basically making me almost bedbound. So which was really hard because I had like a
Mm.
sort of at that stage like my third child was around 9 months old, and I had these 2.5-year-old twins. And I remember literally in the morning having to really will my body to roll so it could actually get out of bed because I couldn't
Mm.
lift my feet to get out of bed. So I'd have to do this like whole body roll. And I remember like almost crawling up the stairs to, if I had to go upstairs because
Oh,
my
goodness.
body collapsed. So it kind of felt like the only way I can describe it is like a nervous exhaustion or like a nervous breakdown, but it was a real physical manifestation of
Mm.
depression, which was something that I had no idea that actually happens. But actually, working with women in that area, I realised how common.
It's so common. The body reacts.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it was a response to being in that high adrenaline state for such a long time.
Mm.
So, but I'm really sorry to hear about your experience because that is really hard. I think, and again, there's so much grief there because our expectations are that it's going to be so easy and it's the best thing to do, and we should be able to do it so easily. And when it doesn't come easy, we're kind
Yeah.
of we feel like failures, don't we? That we haven't managed to do that in whatever way it was that we had imagined it to be. So
That's right. And I think that there's a lot to be said about compassion rather than just telling people what to do.
yeah,
Because from my experience before what I'm doing now, I'm a health psychologist. So I'm very much into health promotion and keeping everyone healthy. And when it comes to patient information and health promotion information, when it comes to breastfeeding, they would say it's best for your child. This is what you need to do. You need to do this for the benefit of your child. It's good for the mom and the child, and da da da. I know that. You know what I mean? You don't have to keep telling me. I know that. But when you are unable to do that and all that information is bombarded,
yeah,
you keep hearing this is how it should be.
yeah,
And when you are unable to do that, it just adds to the pressure. It doesn't
absolutely. Yeah,
necessarily help. So there's a lot to be said about showing compassion and
yeah,
showing support, just being there for the person rather than lecturing them and telling them what to do.
100%.
And in your case, did you have people who were there to provide support? Because I certainly did. I didn't notice that I was having a nervous breakdown. Other people around me noticed it and took me to the doctor, locked me in a room until I actually pick up the phone and book an appointment because I couldn't see it myself. But in your case, were there people around you who
No,
that
nobody. Well, I mean, obviously I've got my husband around me, and actually it was a very hard time for us actually, because I think as well he was really struggling because he also had 3 children and a really busy job, and then would come home with his wife who was like in bits. So it must have been really hard for him, and I think he just couldn't see it. And again, with my with a lot of family members, I think as well, they find that really hard as well, like to know how to react. It's not something that is a comfortable topic to talk about, is it? Mental health.
Yeah.
Mental health has got such a big stigma, and and I know that it's very uncomfortable when I talk about it so openly, because I think that that's a real struggle for not just my family, but a lot of other sort of families. It's a bit of a struggle to be so open and be so vulnerable and not hold any shame about these things. It's not an embarrassment to become so ill. And so no, I think my parents were both working, and everybody was around, but I think nobody could really see what was happening. And I think because traditionally and historically, I'd always been quite a strong person and quite a resilient person and really able to handle anything that was sort of thrown at me. I think
there's an expectation.
It was a bit of a shock that I wasn't able to manage this. That was a shock. I had been like independent. I'd always been very, very, very fiercely independent. And for suddenly not to be able to manage it was a shock. But what eventually happened was, I think just I overheard something, or I think I was doing a lot of reading in Google. And then eventually I thought, God, what does depression feel like? And when I Googled depression and symptoms of depression, a lot of the tick boxes there I ticked. Now, because my son was actually 9 months old by that stage, I had thought, well, it can't be postnatal depression. I think it just didn't really connect it because I didn't feel depressed after I had my son. It was much later. Yeah. And it also coincided with, I did manage to breastfeed all of my children, and it also coincided with when he started to reduce how much milk he was having, which can also have an impact on how you're feeling, make you feel a bit more anxious, which again is never ever talked about, that actually the influence of oxytocin on your mental health is never ever spoken about. And I think that was possibly the bit that just completely finished me off, possibly. It was like, I don't think it was that, but I think that had a bit of an influence on the overall experience of what happened. So,
right.
Yeah.
I think it's really important, all these programs that's going on right now, with the awareness of mental health problems, just recognizing the signs in yourself or in others is actually a step forward, because if we become aware, we can talk about it. And when you notice that someone needs help, you can offer that support, you can offer that help. But at the same time, when you can notice the symptoms yourself, then you could actually reach out and ask for help without really feeling like, oh, I'm such a wreck. This is so embarrassing. It happens. It happens to the best of us, and even to the best of us. And actually, when you've been such an independent person, when you've always just been a high achiever, for example, always just getting on with what you have to do, and suddenly you're the one who needs help, that could be quite tricky. It can lead to like an identity crisis, like what's going on. It's hard to figure it out, especially when you're already not in the right space to be thinking
100%.
about these things.
Yeah, 100%. And I think I'd always been the mum who had everybody round to her house, and I had always provided that emotional support. I used to have everybody round, and I would provide that emotional support to other people. And I think then when that dynamic changes, I think that is really tricky, and tricky from your own perspective, because there's so much shame tied up with feeling like that. There's so much shame that suddenly you're not coping and you're not used to being that person who's needing other people, and there's a lot of shame there, I think. So I think that's one of the biggest, there's so much stigma around mental health.
Yeah. And
And
again, I'm going back to, maybe it's my word for the day, compassion. Because
yeah,
again, when someone is feeling this way, instead of telling them, oh, it's gonna get better, think positive, pull yourself together, it actually doesn't help.
yeah, it
It
makes it
actually
worse.
can, yeah, it can make it worse.
Yeah,
All you need to do is just be there, show a bit of compassion until it gets better. The person
absolutely.
who is experiencing this just needs a bit of comfort, someone who has that compassion, rather than being lectured and, forcing them to recover. You have your own pace of recovery. When you catch a cold and someone tells you, just recover now, it doesn't work that way. It takes a bit of time, and in the meantime, look after the one who's unwell, and
Absolutely.
they
Yeah.
will recover in time. So what, if you can see someone who's experiencing this, what tips, what can you do to help them? Because some people
I
just don't know
think
what to
it's
do.
I think it's a really simple, like, I don't think it's that complicated. I really think it's things like turning up, like putting the kettle on, and just actually making yourself emotionally available and actually just like listening. And
Mm.
listening is such a undervalued skill and often done really incorrectly because we're so desperate to fix people and we're so desperate to fix them, resolve it, for the problem to go away really quickly. And actually making that space to actually sit and listen with compassion and
Mm.
with acceptance and without a judgment and without advice and without your thoughts about it, just kind of like listen and
Just be
reflect,
there.
be there. And
Yeah.
also then as well, like, it's go off and do some, I run a volunteer organisation for women who are experiencing perinatal mental health illness. And as part of that, um, we have had friends of other people contact us asking us if they can, if we're the right person for their friend. And I think doing some of that research to find out what kind of help and support there is out there, and doing that, because sometimes when you're so unwell, it's really hard to know where to go and
You
get
can't
help.
figure it out. You're not
You can't
thinking
think.
straight. You don't have the headspace for it.
That's right. And I remember the health visitor was like, okay, well, I'm going to refer you to the perinatal mental health services. Now, she was absolutely lovely. She was really, really lovely. But that was like a massive, massive, massive waiting list. There was a huge waiting list. So I was going to turn off. Sorry, I thought I turned everything but off.
Don't worry. I thought it was mine.
Well, no, I think it was mine. So she was brilliant at referring me, but she didn't ever say, do you know that you can go and get private help? Or what
Mm.
about looking at different solutions? Or what about getting like a doula in to come and help you? Or get a maternity nurse in? Or get somebody in to come and help you? Why don't we sit together and look at all the different ways that we can try and get help in for you? And that really wasn't done, that kind of like, that
To
kind of
see
a,
what could work for you.
and I think that's a really simple thing I think other people can do, is actually identify what services there are out there and to support that, mum or dad or human, whoever it is, support that person to actually get the support that, to help them to identify what support there is out there. Because when you're so unwell, you're pulled down different services and you have no idea how good they're going to be or how long you're going to have to wait to
Yeah,
get.
which direction? Yeah, you can get even more confused.
Yeah, yeah.
Trying to seek help, you actually get overwhelmed trying to seek help. And to be perfectly honest with you, that, without criticizing the NHS, I think this could be more streamlined. There could be a little bit more structure, and but we are getting there. We're having these conversations, and there would be ways to make access to support easily accessible. We know that
Mhm.
it's available, but which one, and how do you get it, and how, what can you expect, and
Yeah.
so on. But from your story, what worked for you? How did you recover? How did you get better? Or is this still an ongoing recovery for you?
Um, Well, the first thing I did was obviously about medication, which took me a little bit to sort of get comfortable with doing. But I think 2 or 3 months after that sort of initial episode, or when I sort of became very unwell, I started to take medication, and that absolutely helped. The other thing that really helped was actually going back to work. By the time I got access to counselling and support through the perinatal mental health team, I was actually back at work, and that felt really good. And I was also doing more volunteer work with the Twins Club, and I really enjoyed that. So I think that really gave me like a sense of achievement, or something I really
You're
enjoyed doing.
doing something
I felt
useful.
really
Yeah.
fulfilled doing it. So like we set up like antenatal classes and did quite a lot of work, and I just really enjoyed doing all of that. So whilst that was more burden to me in terms of workload, because I felt really fulfilled and I wasn't maybe just being mum, I think I
Yeah,
really
you have that identity back, that apart from being mom, you're Tricia.
and I think I really enjoyed doing that. And I would do like a lot of breastfeeding supports. I would drive around people's houses and like help them to breastfeed their twins, and I really enjoyed doing all of that sort of work. So so I had access to CBT counselling, so I had that through the perinatal mental health team, and I went back to work too, and the medication, I think all of that helped me to recover a bit. And then eventually I decided that actually I wanted to retrain, and I decided that actually I didn't really want to. I really had a great job. I worked at the University of Edinburgh. It was a brilliant job. It was a really, I'd worked really hard to get to that level, and I'd worked really hard to be there, and I had an amazing boss. So it was no reflection of him, because if I've ever worked for, like, he was like the person I enjoyed working with the most. Like, he had so much trust in me, and we just worked really well as a team. But I just decided I decided that I wanted to work with mums like me, to try and prevent that thing from subsuming them. And I think I'd been so badly affected by it
that you want to help, and
I wanted to sort of work in that area. And I was like, I really want to work with mums. And I really enjoyed the stuff I did at the Twins Club, and I enjoyed a lot of the emotional support that I gave to other women, and that okaying of their experiences, and validating their emotions, and validating a lot of the things that they were feeling. And I really wanted to kind of sort of do that. So the first thing I did was trained to be a doula, and then I ended up working a lot around mental health. So then I'd come across emotional freedom techniques, so EFT. So I did EFT training. So then I started providing EFT support, and then I did some other different other approaches. So I now sort of do different things with different women that I work with. I pull different therapies in to support them, and that's now more of what I do. So I do some.
That's how you actually got to where you are now, and I find it really fascinating, because it actually shows how it can be different to different people. But for us, the outcome is sort of similar. What happened is, in your case, you actually went back to work, you got yourself busy, you retrained, and so on and so forth. In my case, it was actually returning to work that caused my nervous breakdown. I was overwhelmed. I didn't want to go back. Well, it's not that I didn't want to go back to work. I love my work. I love teaching. I was a university lecturer. I'm a researcher. But it was just too much on top of, being a full-time mom. So pulling myself out of work and giving myself that time and space to just chill and just to be mom, and to take back control of what I want to do actually helped me. In your case, you got busy, you retrained, you went to volunteer, you did a lot of things.
I had to get out of my situation. I had to be away from, I'm a really hands-on mum, and I love my children. Like I don't. It's not a reflection on them. I think I just needed a physical break from my home and environment, and from the chaos. And like mum says, I've always really struggled with noise. So actually what I really needed was like just to go somewhere. Time out where like I could just sit with like my headphones on at work and just work, and not have to deal with the noise. And it is noise that is one of the things that really can overwhelm me, is actually noise.
Me
But
too.
it's
Me too.
exactly what you have with 3 children. So being at home
Just
with
to
3 children,
have that space to be out of that
exactly,
chaos.
exactly. And I think
But
that, so it, maybe it wasn't being busier that helped, but I think it was actually the
having
bringing
that time
of the
away.
environment. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. What I find interesting too is through that journey and transitioning to what you are doing now, and it's actually the same in my situation, where you've been through such a difficult time that you want to help others who are going through that same process, or if you can prevent it. And in your case, you trained as a doula, and now you're helping mothers. In my case, I actually ended up writing my books and
Amazing.
helping people to apply psychology, to get better. So I love that, having gone through that difficult
Yeah,
time and coming from a place of service and trying to help others who are still in that position, or trying to find a way to prevent that from happening in the first place. We've transitioned from where we are to what we are doing now, and because we've went through that period. It's
yeah, absolutely.
fascinating.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I feel really passionate about it because, as you said earlier, if we talk more about it, then we can get early intervention. And actually, if we have early intervention, that has a massive effect on how mum feels about herself, and how that relationship with her children and relationship with her partners and the bigger community and family around her. But it's all about that early intervention. And I feel so passionate that we need to start talking a lot more about it and being really open about it, and really taking away that shame and stigma that we feel around perinatal mental health, because we always need early intervention around it, but never more so than when we're also trying to recover when we've got a small baby. And so that early intervention is so important at that time. So I feel really, really passionate about it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and it's great that we're having this conversation, really just being open about it, talking about it, and not necessarily normalizing it, but saying to people it's actually okay. Don't
Yeah.
worry, it happens, it's okay. And if it happens to you, feel free to reach out for help. And if you can see someone struggling, reach out and help them as well. So it's again the word of the day. It's all about compassion and supporting each other. It's supporting each other in the process. So Trisha, thank you very much. If people
Thank
want
you.
to find you, where can they find you and how can they connect with you?
It's just super simple. So it's just triciamurray.co.uk is my website. So it's really super simple. And I'm both on Facebook and Instagram, but probably more so on Instagram. And it's Tricia Murray UK. It's super, super simple. So nothing too complicated. So yeah. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Trisha. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. I hope you found this conversation enlightening. Even for us professionals, in the mental health professions, we also experience mental health issues. So we need to talk about these things, raise awareness. If you are seeing symptoms of anxiety, depression, or mental health problems, reach out for help. There's no shame. And if you find that someone is in that position, reach out, show compassion, just be there, listen and give that listening ear without having to lecture them, just be there and support them in this process. Because as we say here in the PAMI Code Facebook group, we can't do this together, we can go together. And that's essentially the main message that we have today. So thanks again, Trisha. Thanks
Thank
again,
you.
everyone. And we'll catch up again next time in another purposeful conversation here in the PAMI Code Facebook group. Until then, take care and bye for now. Bye.
Bye.